MacArthur. Yesterday you spoke a little bit about Mormonism, and today about how Jesus is the only way. At my school and places, I encountered these people.
These people, classic.
And yeah, we disagree, but they say we basically believe, we believe in Jesus too, and we believe he died on the cross. I was wondering how I can talk to them and how I would approach them without, like, I don't want to call them demon worshipers or anything like that.
You may get to that of necessity.
Well, the Pharisees got to that point. I mean, they did hurl the same insult at Jesus Christ, labeling him a demon worshiper. And I imagine it was with no less contempt, mockery, scorn, and derision than we're seeing here from these doctors of the law.
Just to talk about Mormonism for a moment, because we all confront this. I've had a couple of personal private meetings with the Theological Brain Trust of BYU, who came down, spent hours and hours with me. Robert Millett, I don't know that name, who writes most of their stuff on theology.
Huh?
And we have talked through all of these issues. Here's the problem. They are polytheists. They have millions of gods, just millions of them and more all the time.
Millions of gods. Now, kids, this is important. As you get older, you'll start to have this deep respect for people who master their craft, for the top 5% of people in any industry, whether it's sports, whether it's artisan, whether it's business, anything. And you start to realize they are really, really good because they put in the time, they have natural ability, they've honed their skill, their technique is perfect. And let's say you went to see a magician and he was doing a card trick and you're thinking, man, he's so good with his hands. I know he's hiding something. I know he's not showing me something. I know I'm being tricked, but I can't figure it out because I'm missing information. So maybe he'll tell me the trick. And they always say, don't tell him the secret because then you'll be nothing to them. I look at sectarian YouTube pastors the same way. They're fighting the same battle. It's still status games. They're trying to persuade people. It's clear they have contempt for certain people with certain beliefs that they believe are inferior to their own. And you see that here when he talks about polytheism, which is a naughty, naughty word. But if I were on this stage, I'd say, hey, good doctor of the law, what's polytheism? So the dictionary says it's a belief in more than one God. Okay, well, if I read the scriptures and this guy, Jesus Christ, who's a God and claims to have saved all humanity, says he was sent here by his Father so that people believe on him have everlasting life. What does that mean? Well, it says here that he was sent here to do the will not of himself, but of his Father in heaven. He told Mary, don't touch me. I haven't yet returned to my Father. Somewhere else in the scriptures, he says, I do only the things which I've seen my Father do. A deep and profound testament of what he actually, we don't know what it is he saw, but he said, everything I do, I've seen my Father do. That's not presented here. Because if it was, you'd say, okay, if there's a Father who's a God and a Son who's a God, that's two gods. That's polytheism. Now, eventually they came up with the Trinity doctrine to get away from this idea that maybe everyone who believes in God is a polytheist or everyone who understands the nature of God. But he doesn't do that. He just mocks and derides this idea. And he goes to the opposite extreme of they have millions of gods, not they worship, not they believe in, not they know the names of any or have any, like there's any doctrine surrounding it. Just this grenade of they have millions of gods. Do we? That's like saying there's 97% of client scientists out there who all believe the same thing. And people just eat it up because they're blue-pilled. And it's easier to be spiritually blue-pilled than politically blue-pilled. So they don't even question it. They don't say, hey, show me the list. Who are they? What do they specialize in? Nope. They just eat it wholesale. And then at the very end, he actually mixes in a little bit of truth, the actual doctrine, with all this nonsense. Listen to this.
Every time Mormons have a baby, they potentiate another god.
Potentiation. Ooh, this is getting juicy. Now, two things here. One, to say that Mormons have this privilege that they have specifically is not scriptural, right? Everybody has that privilege. So I find it odd that he would eliminate himself from that, which he does later in this video. I think it's a weird thing. But two, potentiation. This is the scriptural and doctrinal basis of this whole narrative. And now he's already set the table that anyone who believes any of this stuff is crazy and a demon worshiper or whatever. And I know why he's doing that, right? This is a competitive sport. Competing for souls is it's a contact sport. And he's hitting hard here. But it's funny to me because this idea of potentiation, we accept it in mortality. We believe that if two parents have a kid, that kid has their DNA. their traits, their characteristics, the potential to be just like them. If I'm a king, let's take it up a level. I'm a king and I have a kid. I expect that someday that child will be king. Now, what's required? He's in the embryo stage, right? He's got all the building blocks, but I have to create an environment for him where he can be inculcated with my values, my skill set. I have to train him and mold him and hope that he makes good enough decisions that someday he's worthy to wear that crown, that he increases in stature and wisdom and judgment. And my job and my hope is that someday he'll be able to reach his full potential. Now, is that a mortal principle only? Is that for temporal life, or is that an eternal principle? Are we truly made in the image of God? Is our life here patterned after what life will look like after we leave? Or is this all a social construct that has no meaning? And his comment about us potentiating gods is something that was made up. I would turn to the scriptures when Christ was being accused of blasphemy, not for saying he was equal to God, but claiming he was the Son of God. And his response is very telling. Now, kids, I want you to understand, I didn't get this till I was much older, but there is a pattern. When someone's accusing Christ and snaring him, tempting him, he doesn't say, hey, hang on, let's talk about this. Let me explain it to you. Let me illuminate your minds and help you understand it. He says, let's look back at your law. Like he did in John 10, when he said, is it not written in your law, I said you're all gods? I said, ironic, because he's quoting himself. And they don't understand it because he cannot teach them anything. He cannot explain to them the higher law because their understanding of the lower law, of the law they do have, and their profession to understand it is so corrupted and misguided that he really doesn't have anything to add to the sandy foundation they built for themselves and proclaimed as true. And you see that here with Dr. MacArthur. To those that hath shall be given more. To those that hath not shall be taken away what they presume to have.
So this is anything but Christian in its view of God.
His incorrect view of God.
They have a Christ who is another Jesus. And another Jesus is a way to preach another Jesus and you get cursed. 2 John, have nothing to do with them or become a partaker of their evil deeds.
Evil deeds. We just switched gears here. We went from beliefs to the evil deeds. Well, which one's he referring to would be my question. In fact, that's the same question Christ asked in that same chapter when the Pharisees wanted to stone him. He says, many good works, i.e. deeds, have I shown you from my Father. For which of them do you stone me? I have the same question because I see a pattern here. John?
But what they said to me was, we love Jesus. In fact, they said, we love Jesus so much, and we want our young people at BYU to love Jesus. And so we've had our students in some of the classes read the gospel according to Jesus that you wrote to help them to love Jesus more. Well, I went into panic. What did I leave out?
Quite a bit, I imagine. What's amazing to me is if the roles were reversed, and they never would be. This isn't a man who's ever going to encourage anyone to try to learn something from an LDS theologian, to engage in two-way dialogue to see what they can learn from LDS members. It's not going to encourage them to read the Book of Mormon. It certainly wouldn't at an institution of higher sectarian learning buy books from LDS authors and say, hey, let's look at a different perspective. But that's what BYU did. Right or wrong, I actually don't agree with that. I think that that's the wrong course of action, but I can see why they did it, to say, look, we actually want to give our kids a different perspective. We're not afraid of letting our kids explore different ideas and decide where truth lies. And his reaction, not gratitude, not humility, not introspection, appreciation, horror, smugness, arrogance. A man of God, you say?
That was not a good experience for me. But they said to me, we also believe in grace. And they do. They have this sort of, this massive grace concept that most people, even though they don't become Mormons, they won't get, there are three heavens in Mormonism.
He's purposely omitting, again, back to the magician, kids. Why is he not telling you what he must know? That there are 3 degrees of glory described by Paul in connection with resurrected bodies in the next life. That's in Corinthians, all right? We didn't make that up.
And only one of them is where you want to be. The other 2 are, you're stuck with being single forever.
Again, another weird self-own, because that's evangelical doctrine, that you're single forever. Do you believe in marriage in heaven, John? No, you don't. You better backpedal real quick and say something weird to save it.
There's a lot of weird sexuality in Mormonism, as you know.
There it is. Good save.
That is part of it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But there's this first heaven, which is where grace operates. And this is a kind of near universalism, where just because God is gracious, he'll let you into that place, and it's better than hell. Most people will get to that place, but you're stuck being single and you're stuck in a deprived situation.
Which is ironically evangelical understanding and teaching of marriage after this life, as in it doesn't exist, which means everyone's single. Now they may say, you're with Jesus, but you're not with your wife. Your marriage has been dissolved, the union nullified. He's dunking on Mormons for saying some people will experience that and admitting it's a deprivation, when he believes everyone will experience that. Why isn't there someone on stage to go, hey, John, I got a question. Like, that's your doctrine. Is that a bad thing? And if that is your doctrine, who has the better argument? Which one's more desirable? Which one manifests a God that has both more power and more authority?
But if you have any desire to get to the second or the third, then you better crank up the works. So in the end, wrong God, wrong Christ,
That's two gods.
wrong way of salvation. They also say the Bible is corrupt.
That it's been corrupted through translation errors and omissions. That's true.
You see that in all their literature. The Bible has been corrupted. It is not trustworthy.
He's exaggerating again. This is a sales pitch. No one says that.
It's not always right. It is not correct. And you have to turn to them for the correct interpretation of it and all of that. So I think you can start with the authority of Scripture. You can start with the person of God. You can start with the person of Christ.
Again, two gods.
Start with salvation by grace. They even said to me, we believe in salvation by grace. And I said, well, explain the full extent of that. Well, God didn't have to give us a way to earn our way into heaven. So it's a gracious thing that he allows us to do that.
It is. I just wish someone on the panel would be intellectually honest enough to say, wait a minute, it's actually an interesting question. Like, we know in the scriptures that Christ pleaded with his Father to let the cup pass from him, and then said, but nevertheless, not my will be done, but thine. I am here to do what you want me to do, God the Father, and I'm here to obey the instructions I've been given. And here you have him making a mockery of the fact that we're considering that in the grand scale, that everyone has agency, including Jesus Christ, who Satan did everything he could to try to stifle him and alter this plan and mess it up for all of us. But that question begets other questions, which they will never ask, and they have no concept of, like, what gift is so great that a sacrifice of an eternal, perfect God is necessary to bring it about? What is that? Is that so that half people can go to hell and the other half can go back to where they started? No, not even close.
But I think you can pick any one of those you want, or try one and then try another. But you need to first distance them from Christianity.
This is the woke gospel, the Marxist gospel of division, not unity.
This is the thing they're trying to close the gap.
Yeah, the gap of doctrinal apostasy and the spiritual darkness and despair that brings on the people who suffer from it. The Lord would love them to have more light, more knowledge, more truth, a closer relationship with Jesus Christ. But there are certain people seeking prestige and honor amongst the world who are making that more difficult to happen and impeding that progress. Looking at you, Doctor.
This is their formidable effort. You need to make sure they understand that this is more like Hinduism and paganism and false religion than it is anything to do with Christianity. And so they need to understand that they are anything but Christian. They are seriously, fatally, and terminally non-Christian.
John, don't you think that there's a schizophrenia in Mormonism in the sense that in this kind of a context, they desperately want to be considered as Christians, but the whole rhetoric of Mormonism has been Christianity has been corrupted and we alone have corrected it. So we only understand it, but we want to be considered one of you too. At the same time, both of those sides are played.
That's right. And the best that can be said of us who are non-Mormons is that we may get into grace heaven, the lowest heaven, and be stuck being single forever. And with all the deprivations that also go along with that situation.
No, careful what you wish for. Look, kids, I just wanted to give you an example of, or actually kind of let you contrast what you see and hear with the people in your life who give selfless service, Christ-like service and love to others, who genuinely care compassionately and do everything they can to help people in need, whether it's temporally, spiritually, doctrinally, versus the contempt, the disdain, and the point scoring you see from people like Dr. John MacArthur in the sectarian, in the highly competitive, highly lucrative world of sectarian church hierarchy. So anyway, just important to see how it works, how it sounds, and I hope the young man that sought out his advice will realize that he may not be picking the right role model and the right guide. Love you guys. Talk to you later.
This is the way.